Hey everybody, it's John Pollock here alongside Cody Saftik, and Holly Holm is where we are going to start off, coming off of Saturday's interesting main event at UFC 208. She is filing an appeal for the New York State Athletic Commission to review the actions, or maybe the inaction, of referee Todd Anderson for not taking a point away in betweens round 2 or 3. Do you think that Holly Holm has a case here, or is this maybe just simply putting pressure on that this rematch is the direction that they go in?
Well, personally, it's not that whether I think she has a case or not, because when I look at this fight, it was a close fight. And I know people are yelling out robbery, and they would have liked to have seen a draw. Maybe that's the right call. But I personally feel that in a close fight like that, she had lost. Were the punches late? Yes. But were they excusable? Not excusable, John, but the point was not taken away. Generally, when something gets appealed like this, there's a very, very low success rate. Appeals generally never get reversed over. And we're looking at people who had solid cases in the case of a Anthony Johnson versus a Kevin Burns, where you can look at the eye poke. We're looking at a Matt Mitchell versus Travis Brown, where you can look at the eye poke. Those are not getting reversed. I'd highly doubt that they would time it and say, oh, geez, a fraction of a second or 1 second had passed and that shot had landed. However, it's worth appealing if your Holmes can't, because there is a case here. First of all, there's no doubt in the second round that that punch definitely changed the outcome of the fight, whether it should be a no contest from that point going forward, and whether it's going to affect her or not, it's worth appealing. And finally, if you look at Tanya Evinger recently in Invicta FC 20, she loses against Yana Kunitskaya, and then finally she does the same thing. She appeals it, being like, well, you know what? They fought. It was not an illegal maneuver on the armbar. I got armbar, and she got the no contest, and I was very surprised about that. You do the rematch, so there's no harm in putting the objection. There's no harm in floating that out there. But I personally don't agree with it. I think it is a loss, and Holm will just have to move forward.
I guess the argument is, it seems based on the appeal, they are more focused on Todd Anderson than they are the foul by Germaine de Randamie. As many officials have noted, just the horn sounding, it is still the referee's job to initiate the end of a round and step in there. And while I feel that there's a lot of heat on Todd Anderson, I think at the same time, we see a lot of different officials, we see a lot of different fights every single year, and it's not like this is some kind of thing that happens all the time where you have an inexperienced ref and there's late shots. I mean, to me, there is equal blame to go around here.
I think it's unwarranted criticism on Todd Anderson. A lot of the narrative that I've been seeing is, well, it's the New York Commission, they're really young. How do they have a guy inexperienced like Todd Anderson? Todd Anderson is not inexperienced. He's been refereeing for a very long time. He's done 1,000 matches. He's done obviously and notably a lot of Bellator bouts. Yep. But he's someone that's been around. And I think when you look at the great referees in MMA, there's a Big John and there's a Herb Dean. Every ref has a blunder. There's always a mistake that you can look at. My favorite ref at the time anyways, Josh Rosenthal. I thought this guy was great, but every guy has their blunders. That is the tough job of refereeing. It's a fine line. You're trying to jump in there, and by the end, he was basically getting in there before the round even ended because he had heard this criticism. But right away, we hear the New York Athletic Commission come out and say, well, the UFC never protested Todd Anderson in the main event. When they saw that he'd be reffing the main event, they never said anything. So then to come out after the fact and say, how could you let this happen? Well, you knew this was going to happen. They feel comfortable with Todd Anderson. I feel they have Todd Anderson's back, and I don't think that they go back on this. But that's just my 2 cents.
Yeah, I guess it brings about as well the fact of, you never want to just go so hard in one direction where it is black and white, and I think that's the concern about just automatic point deductions, because no foul is like another one. There's always going to be mitigating circumstances, but in this case, to me, it should have been an automatic point deduction. Like that is not going to, you put that in place, look how many eye pokes we've seen this year. Any? Have we seen any eye pokes of guys putting their fingers in?
Right.
I mean, you now have that in people's minds, and I think that is something to at least look at here. The fact that this happened twice, there were no point deductions, and had there been, this is a different outcome. This is a draw at best.
Yeah, I don't look at the second one as being particularly dirty. I think that one's a lot closer. Is that the tensions rised up because in the second round, you're like, oh my God, that one was dirty. I think the point should have been deducted right there. I weigh heavily, if you're doing multiple infractions, if you grab the fence one time, maybe there should be a point deduction. If I was reffing it, I wouldn't. Second time you grab the fence, I totally agree. But damage is what I weigh. If I poke you in the eye and you are now compromised, if I land a groin shot and you are now compromised, even though it's intentional, I've compromised you.
Going back to the fence grab though, why are you not taking a point on that first one?
Did it change the outcome of anything that was happening?
Maybe it did if I didn't get a takedown.
And we've seen that before. We've seen refs physically be like, whoa, that stopped the takedown. Even like Yoel Romero-Jacare, he grabs the fence and completes a takedown. They say, no, this is not a takedown for you. They're going to take the takedown away from you. The problem is that not every referee is the same, and not every commission is the same. And now you have...
Maybe that's a problem.
It's a big problem.
Do I need a warning in my 5th fight when I know from my previous 4 fights, this is illegal? You cannot grab the fence. Why do I need a verbal warning while we are already in the middle of action? You tell people hard and fast, they're not grabbing that fence.
I agree, and taking point away, that'd be the way to start. However, not all these guys train in a cage to begin with, and I'm not saying that they're at fault in that. I'm saying that when you're in there, heat of the moment, you're fighting somebody, you get taken down, you happen to grab the fence. And if you're gonna now say, you grab the fence once, John, you lose a point automatically. How many times do we see a grounded fighter grab the fence with his toes? We're gonna deduct them from points? Now everybody's losing points. You have to slowly clean it up. I do agree. I don't think that cheating is a part of the game. I think you should somehow remove it, but there's no doubt that that's a big uphill battle to take all of it out.
There's definitely middle ground between guys that are just completely taking advantage and ones who, yeah, some of it's going to be instinctual by mistake and they don't mean any malice by it. There's a lot of middle ground. But believe me, there's many fighters that go in and they realize, hey, I may need to grab the fence and I know I'm not losing a point. Like, what's the worst I'm gonna get is a verbal warning. And for some, it's multiple verbal warnings before this is even thought of. I mean, when was the last time off the top of your head there was a point deduction for a fence grab?
Yeah, I'd probably have to go back to...
Nothing's coming to me. I'd have to look that up.
Michel Prazeres Merbek Teisumov, where I believe he lost 2 or 3 points for
classic
grabbing
fight.
But once again, this is a guy that hasn't really trained in the cage a whole lot. And then, once again, I'm not making excuses for him. I do agree, you have to clean it up. I just think it's going to be a slow battle to get it all out. Cage grab is the least of it. You got to get the eye pokes out first and foremost. You got to get the groin shots first and foremost. Even though it's incidental, if you can take a point away from someone right off the get-go, then they're going to start controlling these weapons a lot. And I'm not saying it's a viable strategy, but you're right. If I'm tired at going into the 3rd round and I know I'm up 2 rounds, then why not land an illegal strike? You take the 5 minutes. Hey, that's my 5 minutes too. I'm going to rest out. I don't like to see that stuff. They're going to have to do something, but I don't have the answers, and I don't think they do either.
Circling back with Germaine de Randamie and Holly Holm, this was hardly a pay-per-view that did gigantic pay-per-view numbers. Dave Meltzer stating the early number at this point is around 210 or so.
Yeah.
Is this rematch something you feel that is worthwhile going ahead with? I mean, there's not any other options at this moment with Chris Cyborg up in the air. Is this the only alternative they do have if Germaine de Randamie does want to fight?
Yeah, if she wants to fight, then I don't really see what else they can do except for do the rematch. I don't think there's a whole lot of public interest in the rematch. Holm was
This isn't a controversy of a close fight that I think all of a sudden people are salivating over a rematch for either. It's very much, it's an in the bubble kind of fight.
I look at Stephen Wonderboy Thompson versus Tyron Woodley, a fight that was a draw, right? And people weren't really salivating for the rematch either. That was a good fight. That was a great fight. I enjoyed it thoroughly. I want to see the rematch, but people are like, oh, well, let's see some other options. This is a 5-round, I'm not going to say stinker, but a fight that the fans particularly weren't behind. And I think with Holly Holm being the selling point of that fight, you're now trying to sell her in a rematch on a 3-fight losing streak fighting for the title. It's just not, it's not viable. It's not a real situation for them. Now you think, okay, Cyborg, they're saying that the suspension might not be full intact. Do something with there, market her. de Randamie's only, I believe, 32 years old. She could wait for a little bit, but that's obviously the money fight. And I think the UFC's a point now when you see a 210,000 buy pay-per-view, you think, okay, guys, let's put on some big fights. de Randamie Holm 2 is not a big fight. de Randamie versus Cyborg, well, that is a big fight.
Well, we will see what happens with Holly Holm's appeal to the New York State Athletic Commission as she seeks out a rematch with new featherweight champion Germaine de Randamie.